like to welcome you to our Amino acid analysis workshop. It's a great opportunity to have you on. We hope for this workshop to be an interactive, beneficial workshop for all of us. We'd like to welcome our speakers, Mr. Arie Kant. He's the managing director at Seacom GmbH owner and the managing director by Kant Chromatography and Purification Solutions. Mr. Arie Kant started his career in 1982 in sales at Pharmacia, now called Citibia, for LC, FPLC, and HPLC. From 1990 till 2001, he was international account manager and product specialist for HPLC, amino acid analysis, and DNA peptide synthesis at Eppendorf, AG. The period from 2001 to 2008, he was responsible for sales and marketing amino acid analyzers and protein purification systems and media at GE Healthcare and a laboratory service company. After which he started his company by Chromatography and Purification Solutions. Nowadays, Mr. Kant is acting managing director for Seacom.
Thank you. Thank you for a nice introduction. All right, good. So today we'll spend, starting this presentation, 45 minutes of an introduction to amino acid analysis. First time I was acquainted or I got in touch with amino acid analyzers was in 1982-83 at the Sophia Children's Hospital in Rotterdam, where the one and only person ever smoking a pipe in a laboratory I met, and we were wondering why we had high ammonium signals in the chromatographs later on. So times have changed since then, you know. It's the one and only person I've ever seen smoking a pipe in a metabolic laboratory. It's kind of special. Anyway, let's say I started my career, thank you for the introduction, and I did a bachelor at the Technical University of Rotterdam in medical chemistry, it was called at the time, in clinical chemistry. And then I realized I was more interested in technology than just the chemistry. And that's kind of determined my career, that I've always been in, after that, in the field of electrophoresis and chromatography since then. And amino acid analysis has been part of my career since, like I said, 1982 already. So today we're going to give you an introduction of amino acid analysis, and it's going to be mainly technical, and the presentation after this will be more about the applications. And the introduction is to say, okay, I will talk a little bit about the history and a note on other chromatography methods that have developed in them, and some pros and cons of this analysis, type of analysis, fields of applications, and then the amino acid analyzer as an integrated solution, as a turnkey solution for amino acid analysis. And then I'll discuss just briefly about the future exploitation of classical amino acid analyzers as they exist today. So the method is known as the Stein and Moore method, and was first recorded and published in 1958 by Stein and Moore. And Mr. Speckman was also part of that, but Stein and Moore later on were awarded the Nobel Prize in 1972. And you could ask yourself, why still bother about a 60-year-old method that still exists today? Isn't there anything more modern, more nice nowadays with the modern technologies that we know, like LC10MMS, for instance? And let's say, to get your attention for this, the amino acid analyzer is still seen as the gold standard also for avoiding possible misdiagnosis. And if that catches your attention, I think nobody wants to report at the Society of Inborn Errors of Metabolism or at the SIMD in the United States about a misdiagnosis. I've been at several symposia in the past where people report a misdiagnosis for certain inherited metabolic disorders. And then, of course, you have a discussion why it was missed. Well, the classical analyzer, I think the main reason for existence in metabolic health today is indeed a decrease of the chance, or avoiding the chance of a misdiagnosis. It's a contributing factor to the whole, what we call it, confirmative diagnosis. And the fundamentals have not changed since the beginning. That is where you see that cation exchange chromatography followed by post-column derivatization with a post-column reagent, which is called ninhydrin. And that by itself sounds simple, but when we go through the principles, you will see there are a few factors that make it not so simple if you would, let's say, set up the method from scratch, like an HPLC reverse phase method, that you say, okay, some water organic solvent gradient, and we're kind of safe for many applications. Now, this is a bit more special, and that's why suppliers in the past have turned it into what we call a turnkey system as much as possible. Although it is a traditional chromatography technique comparable to many HPLCs, but the difference is the post-column part of it, of course. Over the years, many other methods have been tried, up to GC applications even, but let's say amino acids don't like to fly very easily, so you need to do something to them if you want to go that way. That never made it, but let's say for the alternative methods in chromatography as a chromatography technique are mainly pre-column derivatization techniques, where you make a derivative, for instance, with orthophthalmaldehyde and or FMOC, the main two alternative methods, if you would have samples where the classical immunoanalyzer does not have enough sensitivity. That means if you're looking for femtomole amounts of amino acids, then you have a difficult time with the classical immunoanalyzer. That's a single argument why you would go through a pre-column derivatization method, whereas the method by itself, let's say, give you less precision, less repeatability because of the nature of the reagent that you have. For instance, with orthophthalmaldehyde, you have unstable reaction products, and that means unstable over the time that your analysis is running, and you don't see all amino acids because, like protein, hydroxyprotein, cysteine, don't respond to OPA. FMOC, you do have stable products, but FMOC shows the same fluorescence spectrum as your amino acids later on. So that means you have an interference of the FMOC itself, and you're measuring against the background, and you have to remove FMOC as part of some preparation. So these were all reasons that these methods have not established themselves as the gold standard for amino acid analysis in a clinical lab. Now, PI2C and dipsilyl chloride are methods that do not give you a higher sensitivity or other improvements compared to the classical analyzer, so that's why that never made it also. Now, the general issues with pre-column derivatization methods is that your matrix dependence and repeatability. That means that your matrix dependence is if you have a plasma sample or a urine sample is a complex sample that will give more or less interference with your reagent and therefore less accuracy and precision with your samples. So the principle could be explained again in a very simple way to say we have a column resin which is a diphenylbenzene styrenic resin. The eluent is a set of buffers, eluents, based on pH and molarity, and you use a temperature gradient on your column because amino acids respond to temperature on the column as well. And we have the ninhydrin reagent. Or if you want, as a post-column reagent, if you want some higher sensitivity for, let's say, cerebrospinal fluids, then you might consider orthophthalmaldehyde as a post-column reagent. Of course, you would then need a fluorescence detector, but you would gain like a factor 10 to 15 sensitivity for most of the amino acids. keep forgetting that this is actually the switch for the next page. Okay, so let's start at the principle of the column. The column is filled with a resin which is called divinyl benzene styrenic resin, and you could ask, why don't you just take a silica, reverse phase silica, C18, or a cation exchanger on silicas? Well, the point is that we're using pHs up to pH 12 sometimes, and silicas don't like high pHs. You would basically dissolve your column in a very short time. Depending on the solution you're pumping, it could be a matter of hours or a matter of days that you lose your column. So therefore, we take an inert divinyl benzenic styrenic resin of a small particle size of 4, 5, or 7 micrometers. That is part of the resin. The resin is then sulfonated with let's say, sulfonated as a functionality to make it into a cation exchanger. And you would see from the structure of that resin that by itself the backbone is more hydrophobic than a C18 column. But the only way that, or the only reason that the resin behaves kind of hydrophilic is that you have the sulfonyl group, the highly charged groups on the surface of that resin. What it means, ultimately as a consequence in your laboratory, is that since this hydrophobic backbone is that lipids, for instance, could pollute your column over time. And that's the point of attention if you're dealing with an analyzer, that you clean the column with an appropriate procedure after some serious problems. Now, imagine that we have imagine that you have like the titration curves here of 3 different amino acids. And you see that if you look at these titration curves, that there is an area where the amino acids have a net charge that is very close to each other, and we have a point in pH where the net charge of the molecules is very much different from each other. That means, if we look at this example on the top half of this graph, that if you would take a buffer pH value, an eluent pH value of, let's say, low value, here too low, you have hardly any difference in the net charge of these molecules, and that would result in a relatively poor resolution of your peaks. Now, just looking at a higher pH for these 3 imaginary amino acids, you would have 2 amino acids positively charged, so that they would be attracted to your resin, and 1 that would already be negatively charged. As a consequence, the blue peak here would elute as the first peak, and the green peak as a second peak, and the third amino acid would elute as the last peak. And again, if you make a jump in pH value too high, you would have a co-elution of a number of peaks. What that means is that since we do not only have 3 amino acids in physiological samples, we're looking up to 50, 55 amino acids sometimes. It means that the puzzle becomes a bit more complicated in terms of pH, and that's why we're using gradients and the different sets of buffers with increasing pH over the course of the run of that analysis. Now, with ion exchange chromatography, if you would just have the function of pH, it would mean that as long as your amino acid would be positively charged, it would essentially never elute from your column, or never would only elute over many hours or even over days, if you don't do something with competing ions. And if you look at the eluents, we have a certain pH value, and jumping back to that, to give you an idea why we've put this system into, not only us, but suppliers in the past have put it into a turnkey system, is that a difference of 0.02 pH unit of your eluent is already giving a shift in your chromosomes. So to get to a stable system, that is why you have pre-manufactured eluents to, although these systems are open, the recipes are open, it's completely transparent what we're doing, but in order to get stability for your results in your elution pattern, we have pre-manufactured eluents And that's basically the concept of turning it into a turnkey system. Anyway, if you look at the concentrations that you would need for your buffers, you have like what we call the desorption curves, desorption efficiency. That means if you have a very high molarity of your buffer, and let's say the counter ion for physiological samples, we'll not discuss other counter ions, but the counter ion that's important for these type of samples is lithium ion. So we have lithium citrate, lithium borate buffers at a certain pH, and you need a certain concentration. If you have a too high concentration, where all peaks would be at the 100% desorption part of the curve, like here, they would just co-elute also. So that means that you're trying to choose a concentration of the counter ion that is optimal, again, with maximum differences for the set of amino acids that you're looking for. So that means that if I take a very low concentration here, peaks would take forever, and if you're too low, like let's say at this concentration, the red peak, only like 10% desorption power for that buffer, would result in a very wide and late eluting peak. And we're trying to optimize that by using the right concentrations of the counter ions and get chromatographs that more or less look like that. And just pay attention that the third peak here is becoming wider compared to the first one. And we'll see in the chromatographs later on that peaks tend to go wider, and then they're sharp again, and then wider, sharp again. That's an aspect that I will come to that in a moment. Then, something to pay attention to is the temperature of your column, and we're using a temperature gradient, and this part, or this graph shows that if you're looking at early in the chromatogram, within the first 10 minutes, you cannot do much in terms of temperature and influential separation. It only has minor influence. But if you go later in the chromatogram, here in this example, I use the example of alanine and citrulline as an amino acid. You can even, by just changing the temperature like 10 degrees, you would even change the elution order of these peaks. So now we have the set complete. That means we have pH, we have molarity, and we have temperature as the principles of this separation of amino acids. Now, what makes an amino acid analyzer? And you can say, well, still sounds to me like an ordinary HPLC. Well, in some respects it is. But let's say before the time that HPLC was widely used in the market, that was like in the 1980s. Amino acid analyzers, first commercial amino acid analyzers, were available already in the 1960s. A company that I will mention with a few details later on is a company called Beckman, and I know when I was here in 1992 in Kuwait, in the hospitals, they were using Beckman instruments. They're no longer being manufactured. I see one person saying yes to that, but the Beckman analyzers were the standard here in 1992, just after the Gulf War. I was here in this country, and I visited the labs, and nowadays they're using the analyzers from Psyca. But still the same concept, by the way. What makes an amino acid analyzer different from an ordinary HPLC? Well, so far you would say, well, we have a catenary gradient, low pressure gradient mixing. We have a buffer pump, we have an autosampler, then there's an analytical column with temperature control, and then the critical part is here, the mixing via simple T-piece ultimately. But we have a ninhydrin reaction. Ninhydrin is giving you a relatively stable product with the amino acid, and can be measured with 570 nanometers, so very simple concept of 570 nanometer UV actually vis detector, and 440 nanometers for the amino acids that are the secondary amino acids, proline and hydroxyproline. And once the reagent is mixed, you go to a reaction coil or a reactor. A reaction coil, that means we measured there through a capillary, which is like 10 meters long, wrapped as a coil into a silicon oil bath temperatured at 130 degrees Celsius. And that reaction time is about 60 seconds. to give you the final product that is measured with the photometer, and then you have the data collection and some means of control of that system. So the devil is in the detail. There are a few details to be concerned about. Is that here you have this reagent, but the reagent is oxygen sensitive. That means if you have a certain peak height, your reagent will give lower response if it's deactivated by the presence of oxygen. So that means that we use an inert gas to all the lines, the buffers, but more specifically towards the reagent to keep the reagent stable for a period like 3-4 weeks on your analyzer, which is if you have routine samples every day, won't bother you, but if you have only few samples, you would be interested in the stability of your reagent itself, and that's like 3-4 weeks when it's placed on the analyzer. Then the system itself goes via degassing, vacuum degassing to a gradient mixer. You have your reagent pump, your buffer pump, and here we see a column, and here we see the actual separation column, and we call this here a pre-column. But if you look carefully, it's not at the position where I would expect a standard HPLC pre-column. Normally you would expect as a pre-column a 1 centimeter maybe cleanup column right in front of your analytical column. But here you see it's like a 10 centimeter column directly after your buffer pump. And there's a reason for that, and that is that this column is actually not a pre-column, although it has that definition. There's also what we call an ammonia trap. There's also always some influence from environmental ammonia. Hence, the guy with the pipe smoking in the metabolic lab in 1982, we were puzzled by the, let's say, erratic values of ammonia, of the ammonia peak. Well, this is an ammonia trap, and it actually stabilizes your barometer around your baseline in the area of the basic amino acids. Then we have an auto-sampling system, the separation column, and here the illustration of the reactor, and it's simply measured by a computer. And nowadays, the software controls not only the instrument, but also the data collection software. So, what are the pros and cons of this technique? Well, you could say one of the big advantages that's considered as important today is the amino acids are separate in their native form. So your sample preparation is essentially deproteinization, so protein precipitation, adjusting pH, and your free amino acids are measured and separated in the native form, and the post-column derivatization is only a reaction of like 60 seconds, and then you have a stable product to measure. Then what's considered an important aspect is that although, let's say, chromatography systems are not usually known by clinical analyzers as turnkey, fully operatable systems, well, we are now, let's say, since the early 1990s, all suppliers made the switch to make it into a turnkey system. That means the columns, the buffers, the necessary gradients and methods are delivered as a full package. That means that you have a guaranteed result from what we present to you. Over the years, the sample preparations have been well documented, and there's lots of literature there. And they're also in food, and I think it's not the second interest here, but in the food and feed analysis, there is an EU directive and an AOAC directive from the United States that determines this method as the standard method for these analysis. Now, are there any disadvantages? Yes, of course. Let's say nowadays in the clinical lab, an analysis time of like 100 minutes or even longer is considered a long time. And I would say the reason for existence of this analyzer is not because they're so fast, but they are, let's say, showing you any ninhydrin positive compound. That means you're measuring, you're looking for like 43 standard amino acids in your standard method. but there are like 300 known defined physiological amino acids that could occur that you will not see with, let's say, LC10-MS, because you're looking for specific amino acids. But we want to have a clue if something specific turns up. This could be a metabolite from antibiotics, but also could some rare amino acids like argininosuccinic acid. If you, let's say, in suspicion for a rare disease, an amino argininosuccinic aciduria happens like 1 in every 100,000 newborns in the United States. So that's a really rare disease. Although it's suspected that the number is higher, but then we're talking misdiagnosis. And I'm not entering your field because I'm not a physician, but this is, let's say, the main reason for existence, why we call this old method still the gold standard for immunoanalysis, is these kind of aspects. The chances to decrease, let's say, to decrease the chances for misdiagnosis. So, the fields of application for this type of analyzer is pharmaceutical, let's say around the world with quite some instruments, but they're basically only for quality control of infusion solutions. And physiological fluids, I think that's the main field of interest here today, for plasmas, cerebrospinal fluids, and urines analysis. And then I just mentioned food, fermented broths, and free and bound amino acids in basically any matrix. You can squeeze an orange and check the amino acid content. You can squeeze a potato and check for the amino acid content. It's relatively easy. The only thing you need is a precipitation of the larger proteins, which would contaminate your column if you don't do that. So, amino acid analyzer as an approach, I already mentioned it, as a turnkey approach. That means that apart from an instrument, we also, let's say, supply the reagents, the columns, everything you need to make, essentially to give you a stable chromatographic analysis of your amino acids. And having said that, it's still also to the user a transparent system. That means that it's not like we hide the recipes or something. The recipes of the whole systems are open so that you do have a clue what's happening with the machine, if there are any questions related to the application or to your sample. So, sample preparation I mentioned, and I think the one point here that's of interest is the deproteinization of physiological solutions, which is classically or typically sulfosalicylic acid precipitation, where you take like 200 microliters of plasma, you add a 50 microliters of 10% sulfosalicylic acid solution, you precipitate it for at least 1 hour in the fridge, and once you've done that, you do a centrifugation, you take up the supernatant, preferably through a syringe filter, and then you can inject your sample directly to your analyzer after diluting it with a loading buffer, which means you end up with a dilution factor of your sample typically of 2.5. And that, if you do that, you're well within the working range for typical plasmas, where you would see, let's say, still the normal level of a homocysteine, which is like 3 to 5 micromoles per liter plasma, which, let's say, is at the low end. And if you're looking for hundreds of micromoles, if something goes wrong with some patients, then you will easily see that you will be in the measuring range when you're looking at dilution factors of 2.5, 3 for your plasma samples. I will skip these. This is about hydrolysase, very simple analysis. What you will be more interested in is a typical chromatogram like we see here. This is a chromatogram that we made that's a bit longer than the routine analysis that you would do. This is an analysis that you will be scared if you look at the running time, which is like 160 minutes to arginine. A standard chromatogram, I will show you in a moment, is like 100 minutes, but this application, or this gradient, was a question from Professor Bachmann from the Lausanne University Hospital in Switzerland, And he said, well, I sent you the samples, and you tell me what's in there. Yeah. And everything, yeah. And he spiked it with several things and stuff. And then we saw things that we could not identify. So we made the wrong grade, this one, yeah. Just to show what the system is capable of, yeah? And to have a maximum chance for identifying on the spot, because we got a blind sample and we had no clue what was with the sample. So we were looking for not only the 43 standard amino acids that are, for instance, in the Sigma physiological standards, but we were now looking for the specialties, which if I go through the specialties, I will only mention the specialties, is where you find here, for instance, the C, piperglyc acid, homocytruline, saccharopine, arginine succinic acid, cysteine, homocysteine disulfide, the guanuranines, homocarnosine besides carnosine, and these were, let's say, I mentioned them here. Alloisoleucine, of course, is eluting, it should be right here at this peak, alloisoleucine. And by this chromatogram, we, let's say, when I gave Professor Bachmann the results of that sample, he immediately bought 2 systems. Because he said, okay, I want to have that. Because there was no analyzer at that moment, no analyzer on the market available that was capable of doing this analysis. Now, I'm not saying that this analysis, 150 minutes, is the analysis you should run on a routine basis. But it's an analysis that you can run if you're suspicious about certain things. Another thing is that, let's say, what helps us identifying amino acids where you're suspicious, if, let's say, arginine succinic acid would elute in this chromatogram, here at this position, after isoleucine leucine, but in this chromatogram, it would co-elute with methionine, or it would co-elute, let's say, in in this area, methionine, and there's not much space here. And if you have, like, also with the patient, let's stick to the example of the arginine succinic aciduria, you would have a very high citrulline peak, and depending whether it's the complete enzyme deficiency, it's called ASL,
yes,
and be careful here, or it's just a lack of the enzyme, then you will see, in one case, if it's a total lack of the enzyme, or total deficiency of the enzyme, you will see that your signals would go off the roof, completely off scale, and then what to do? Yeah. Well, what you would do with the sample, then, if you're suspicious, and I'm just sticking to one example here, that's arginine succinic aciduria, because it's such a rare disease. What not many people know is that if you take your same sample where you see a high citrulline signal and your signal goes off the chart, and you might have indications for the rare disease, you could identify the amino acid as methionine, you could identify it as cysteine, you could identify it as homocytruline, but maybe it's not, because it's all eluting in the same chromogram. Well, with tandem MS, it doesn't tell you much, because you don't have the masses available to do so. So that means that, now the trick is, you heat your sample, you take the same sample that you just ran, you take your sample, you put it in 100 degrees for 1 hour, and you just, after the 1 hour, you run the analysis again. Now what you see is that the arginine succinic acid decomposes into the anhydride 1 and anhydride 2, and they elute as 2 separate peaks in a 2-to-1 ratio, and that will be a final confirmation that you're dealing not with a methionine, not with a homocytruline, you're dealing with a possible arginine succinic aciduria. And by the way, you can run for that disease both the plasma as well as the urines, and you will see elevated levels of arginine succinic acid in both samples. So another way of confirming, that's what we learned also from Professor Bachmann. He was, if you look in literature, he was famous for, he's retired now, but he was famous for his work on the urea cycle. And he did a lot of amino acids in the past. I learned a lot of let's say, his expertise that he's working on. What you can also do, since you have two signals, I mentioned 440 nanometers. How's my time doing? Is it okay? Because I can talk for 3 hours about 2 minutes. We're seeing here only one signal, but if you run also your second signal, which is the 440 nanometer signal, every amino acid has a quite specific ratio between these two signals. So that means if you divide your signal, your surface area of the 570 channel to the 440 channel, for each amino acid, you get a specific ratio. Let's say for methionine, that ratio is 3.5 between those channels. And you need to determine them for your system that you have in place, put all these ratios in the table, and then compare that if you're suspicious that methionine is maybe not methionine, check the ratio. If the ratio is off, that's another clue that you're not dealing with methionine and you have to look further. And that is, let's say, something that not many labs are doing that, but the University Hospital in France, in Limoges, the hospital in Lausanne, in Switzerland, are monitoring the ratios for every run, every sample. So that is maybe something new for you also to mention. But this is only if you're sufficient, because if you have non-diagnosed patients, this is all not relevant. It's especially when you're looking for unknown diseases that you have to find confirmation diagnosis with the help of amino acid analysis. And that is where, basically that's the main reason for this complex mixtures that the classical amino acid analyzer, the 60-year-old method, is still considered the gold standard. And I was already talking to people in the 1990s, I am that old too, in the 1990s, where we were thinking like, in 10 years this is over. Well, on a worldwide scale, we see that we have seen more centralizations of laboratories, especially in Europe, like the university clinic in Nuremberg, or it's Heidelberg in Germany, has like 7 amino acid analyzers, but therefore 3 smaller hospitals transfer the samples to Heidelberg. So they have the mass screening, they have the confirmation diagnosis and following of patients with like 7 amino acid analyzers. And another reason for some hospitals, like we've seen in France, the University Clinic of Limoges, is that, well, sending samples out, because they maybe not an issue, but they didn't get the money for 10 MMS for fast screening. So instead of sending the samples out, they use a classical analyzer also for routine checks and routine screening, which means that then the analysis time is a bit of a concern, but depending on the amount of samples, you would do the screening as well as the confirmation diagnosis of these patients. This is, by the way, a standard plasma sample picture. Yeah? And what I want to mention here also is you see these 4 colors. And we've just been talking about pH, conductivity, and temperature. Yeah? If you see how the gradient is composed, each color represents one of the buffers. So there are 4 buffers. And you see that in the middle of the chromatograph, for this peak is a little bit compromised, asymmetrical. For the analysis, it doesn't matter much, but it means that this gradient step, where the gradient is moving to the next buffer, is a bit too early. If I put it a bit later, I would have it as a wider lower peak. If I put it a bit earlier, I would have it as a very sharp and high peak. And that's how we influence the separation by the gradient. But I left on purpose, because this is a sample that actually came from the clinic in Limoges in France. So it's not a brochure sample to see how well the instrument is. Here we find a urine sample, easily recognizable by the high urea peak, and easily recognizable by the high ammonia peak here. And so this is the same instrument, same gradient. Here you see the standard urine sample. 10 minutes? Well, it's more than enough time. So, the tendency of this technology is that, and we were talking about, like I said, in the 1990s already, that we believed that this technology would be obsolete by now. Well, it's not. The tendency in the field of physiological analysis is that mass screening has been largely transferred to the LC10MS or the acid proteinoic extraction of the nuclear plates for the blood spot analysis. And but the tendency is that for us as a supplier, it's worldwide a stable market, and we see that by the amount of buffers and columns that are being used, that we don't see a decrease, it's still stable, which is for us as a supplier a nice aspect, of course. Then we see an increase of interest in the field of animal physiology, because by looking at how we feed the animals, we're looking at reducing methane excretion. And that's a topic in research that deserves the interest of amino acid analysis from the research field. And that means we see an increase in that field. The pharmaceutical applications that I mentioned are basically stable because pharmaceutical companies don't like to change the method once a product is approved and has its FDA approvals and everything. If you want to change something, that's a hassle. So that's a very stable thing also. The tendency in food analysis has been going down. Feedstuff analysis is, like I said, if we're talking animal physiology, we're also talking about feedstuff analysis, which has a slight increase in interest. So the 60-year-old method is still showing a very stable platform. So we think, I'm not sure, but we think we will be in this business for the next 10, 20 years also.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. I have one last slide I want to show you, a piece of beautiful work. I want to show a PDF file that is, somehow technology is not helping in this moment. What I want to show you is a beautiful piece of work from a company that here in Kuwait served the hospitals with Beckman Amino analyzer. In the 1980s, Beckman published a physiological analysis report where they collected all the literature and all the data that was produced over the 60s, 70s, 80s, where they identified 300 ninhydrin positive amino acids, physiological compounds that are responding positive on ninhydrin. They identified their elution positions, and they're largely coherent with the amino acid analyzer of today also. And this report is available as a PDF file. I want to show it to you. And it's even till today, and nobody ever did the identification of 300, this is the combination of literature and data of 300 ninhydrin positive compounds that could occur in any sample at any date. And this PDF file is available. I will share it per email. Just give me a note, and I will share it per email. It's a piece of work that we still have to be thankful to the company Beckman in the 1970s, 80s, who's done that type of work. And I wanted to show it to you, but you see the colleagues are. The PowerPoint worked perfectly, but the PDF file is a bit of an issue. Which means there are also in that publication like 130 literature references. So it's not only just a list of amino acids, it's 130 literature references. So it's like a really nice piece of information for amino acid analysis that I can share with you if you need. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Is an MD, PhD clinical pathologist, specialized in clinical biochemistry. He is working in Sabah Hospital, clinical laboratories, deputy head of biochemistry and hormone unit, where most of the metabolic workup are available in Kuwait and handled. He is the site coordinator and tutor at Kuwait Institute for Medical Specialization and Clinical Biochemistry and Metabolic Medicine. Postgraduate education program.
before we start, because I know maybe not all of you, they are familiar with the amino acid analysis, correct? So some people, maybe it's something new for them. So I printed some, okay, which will help us a little bit and when we're going to discuss some cases. This is like normal amino acid chromatography, okay? Because when I'm going to show some of normals, maybe it's you can see and check. So please go through, everybody who can take, and give it to others. I hope it will enough the number. Okay, what's that one? So, first of all, good morning. I want to thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to meet you and to share with you all our experiences in this field. And I want to thank you for your attendance, for your time that you came and you will listen to us. Anyway, just like I want to start my talk. Yeah, in the beginning, I'm not going to talk about technologies, okay? I'm not going to talk, because Mr. Arie, he was enough described. I'm not going to talk about the clinical side of the metabolic disorders, fine? What I'm going to go, this is our aim about interpretation. I want to show you how sometimes it's nice and how it's like easy to interpret any result. And what is the pathway, how we are going to go step by step, then we'll come to the final diagnosis. Because this is what the end user or the pediatricians, they need. They don't know what we are doing. They don't know what it's our job, but we want to share with them some of our things. This picture, I thought like I put it just like positive, negative. Many people, they think we are in the lab like the sum of routine testing. Do you have a result? Positive, negative, that's it? It's not like that. In metabolic disorders, the situation is a little bit different. So we need to, there is a lot of steps, there is a lot of work, there is a lot of sometimes headaches, okay? Then we will come to the final diagnosis, which will help that baby, okay? And sometimes we are under risk. So it's not like so easy to go for positive, negative. In the beginning, we need just to agree about that the timely and accurate diagnosis of any inborn errors of metabolism. That is very important aspect for healthcare, okay? All of us, we agree for this point. Then the rapid diagnosis leads to rapid treatment that improves the long-term prognosis of many of these inborn errors of metabolism, okay? So this is like we need to keep it in mind all the time. The testing of inborn errors of metabolism is complex and usually involves relatively esoteric analysis using laboratory developed tests, like amino acids, urine organic acid, acid carnitines, and many other routine testings. Okay, so they are a little bit different. Then, the interpretation, our talk. In addition to the testing itself, the accurate interpretation of the results of these tests requires a significant amount of practice to perform adequately. Pattern recognition is an important factor and the skill that can be gained through time and efforts. Okay, it's known sometimes, like in literature, it's not so easy to get all the information. And believe me, what in my experience with inborn errors of metabolism, what is in a practical life is much, much different what's in the books. That's why we need to be ready for all of this. There is some conditions which they are very rare, as Mr. Arie he mentioned, some conditions which maybe I'm working in this field maybe for 15 years. I've never seen some of them. And maybe I'm going to resign, I'm not going to see any of them. On the other side, there is some conditions which they are very common, where maybe like from meters, if you show the chromatograph from over there, I can tell you that this is maybe 1, 2, 3. Okay? So we need just like to be ready for all these types. This is the metabolic path. This is like our target. Look carefully, you need to know it by heart. Wow. I can see some eyes which they open. Don't be afraid. We don't need to know it all by heart. This is like with all what's happening in our bodies, okay? It's like how it starts, where it goes. It depends about our feeding, about our conditions, about the metabolism, everything, okay? Fine? But at least, please, what we need to know, that after time, with time, with many years, at least, we need to know, I need to go when I have a baby, or with some metabolic disorders, at least from the clinical conditions or some the beginning of some of the analytes, I need to know that I need to go to the up, I need to go down, I need to go to the right, I need to go to the left. To have a big imagination how it's happening, what's happening in our bodies and with this sick child. Okay? This metro, why I call it metro, because this is like what's happening in our bodies. You know, imagine if there is a metro wagon where it goes on rails and will go to another station. Okay? So if in the middle, this rail, some damage happened. So what will happen in that finally? That a lot of wagons, they will be accumulated and they will be stuck in one place. There will be a big accumulation of these wagons. On the other side, there will be a deficiency. People, they will be standing and waiting for the metro, but it will not come. So sometimes the problem, what we are facing with the accumulation of these, sometimes it's a deficiency of the others. So in our terms, we can say most of these metabolic disorders, we have a substrate, we have a product, and we need an enzyme to get from this substrate to that product. Fine? So, and sometimes this enzyme, it needs some vitamins, some coenzymes, which will help. It's not enough by itself. So when we have a deficiency of that enzyme in the middle, that will lead for accumulation of these substrates and deficiency of the products. Okay, it's not like we don't have one rule for all of it. Sometimes the critical issue, it's about the accumulation of toxic elements. Maybe it's not. Maybe our problem or our target, it's how to cover that deficiency, which our bodies, they need. Okay? No significant abnormality. Many pediatricians, when they send for you any test, they dream about they get this. There is no any kind of abnormality. Is it like that? Is it so easy? One click? No, it's not like that. Here, I just want to tell you that when you are going to see any chromatogram, it's, for me, I feel like it's the sample telling me all her secrets. She will tell me, the sample will going to tell me what happened with it since the beginning, because every single step matters. That will make a lot of changes. Since like the sample collection. So when you are sitting, you need to keep all this in mind. Okay, we don't have something which is right, left. So sample collection. If you collect the sample not properly, or if you collect on wrong tube, that will affect the result. Correct? We'll have some problems. So this is not it. What about transportation? When they are going, you know, when we have 60 degrees temperature in summer, imagine if you transport these samples without cooling back. It will affect. So I will have some changes. So this is also, I need to keep it in mind. Sample receiving. The sample receiving, this is very rare. I need here to tell you, like sometimes, you know, because in a practical life, what we are facing, the sample when it comes, it will be labeled and it will be registered, correct? Then it will go for the machine and they will be running the samples. When you are going to interpret these results, maybe you are sometimes like you're sitting and you are having a big batch of results. Then suddenly there is a request comes like it's written in the clinical data, significant phenylketonuria. You check the result, you will not find any evidence of any phenylalanine. Maybe, could happen. Maybe it's just like they are suspecting. So it could be normal. Okay, let's go ahead. I will go for the next sample. Then after, if you're lucky, maybe like after a couple of samples, you will get another request. You will go to the result, you will find a significant elevation of phenylalanine. Go to the request, checking, it's normal. Even sometimes for checkup. So we need just like to suspect. It's very rarely happening. Very rarely, but can happen? Yes, can happen. So in that condition, when I see this, I need to tell them, hold on, stop. Maybe even from the hospital, another hospital where they send the sample, that maybe there is something which is mixed up. Maybe this sample not belong to this patient. So this headache, I need to think about. I need to keep it in mind. Sample storage, also like when you get a sample preparation. Regarding sample preparation, you know, there is, as Mr. Arie, he was showing that there is some deproteinization and there is and different methods, they have different steps of preparation. Please, when you go to your lab and you are going to check anything else, or you want to ask any question, if you see that your medical technologist preparing his samples, okay, don't disturb. Be quiet. Don't say anything, because anything happened, any wrong, anything he missed while he will, yes, Dr. Ayman, what do you need? And then she will get back, where I am. I prepared here, I added, and maybe I not. So finally, who is think he's going to struggle? Who's going to suffer? Me. Yeah, I'm going to get all these results. Then I thought, there's something wrong in this sample. Samara, maybe this one, and Samara, she will say, I did everything properly, but I feel that there's something wrong, and that will affect my interpretation. Okay, so be careful from all these nuances, because when you're going to interpret, the sample will tell you. When you see the chromatogram, you will feel that there is something wrong. The sample telling somebody didn't follow the rules, maybe by my mistake. Okay, sample injection inside the machines, the chromatograph getting, the result verification, all these steps, and result interpretation, all these steps. Okay, we need to put it in mind why we are looking for that chromatograph. Okay, in addition of all of this, now the best part. Then when they will start, the doctors calling from different hospitals. Dr. Ayman, I have a critical case. We got this one, and we need the results very urgently. Please get it. Okay, when you send the sample, today morning, can I within a few minutes get all the results? On preparation, the sample that it should go, and there is maybe your machine is busy with other samples. So you tell, okay, I will do my best. I know that the criticism, but I do on my best. Then after a few minutes, again he will call the same doctor. Anything? Maybe you got anything? Any results? You tell, still, it's one processing. But you know the patients, and they are just like waiting. Okay, fine. Then another doctor will keep calling. The patients in front of the doors. Please, he's going to kill us. Please give us anything. You will feel what? You will feel that yourself under pressure. You will start sweating. I need to get something. Okay? Then suddenly the parents, they will get your number. From where? You don't know. They will keep calling you. And please, and this is my first son, and this one, and I want to see the result. You feel, okay, I'm getting hot. So what I need to do? Then again, somebody will call. Finally, the big boss comes. This is the director of the hospital or somebody from ministry. Don't tell me. They will call you. I want my results right now. It's as if it's like in my pocket. This can happen. This is what we are facing every day with all these calls, with all these pre-analytical factors and these issues. You feel like I'm sweating, and finally, I need to give something. Okay? The baby is critical. We need to shift him. We need to start treatment. And you need to give something. You are under this in a hurry. You are interpreting the chromatograph. You can miss something or not. You can. But believe me, finally, if you miss something, tomorrow, you will go to the court. Only you. Nobody else. So please take your time when you are interpreting the results. Take your time. And I know you need to adapt yourself to work under all this pressure. Okay, when there is a lot of these pressures, you need to calm and you need to take your time to check every single point from these, because any one of them, they are going to change your interpretation. Okay? Methodologies. Assuming that all these things are good. I'm not going to go in very details of methodologies, but here I want just to start. These three methodologies, they are my children. Okay? I know the companies. I know they are like competing with each other, Mr. Mahmoud, and everybody, they are competing. But for me, I don't see any competition. I see that they are completing each other. Okay? So for you, you need to get all the available techniques to get the final interpretation, the final diagnosis in a correct way. So I feel that all the methodologies, they are helping each other. I'm not going to talk too much about HPLC. Mr. Arie, he discussed very well and enough. There is the GCMS and the LCMS. For amino acids, enough for me just like to tell you that these are the gold standard. I'm one, by the way, is a big fan of Cycam, because since I joined 15 years and this machine is there and I learned them and I can work more 10 years or forever. Okay, I want just to say that the amino acid levels of these amino acids are constant in the blood, and ideally fasting samples, they are the preferred. Okay, and we need to know that we sometimes for interpretation or giving the final diagnosis, maybe we need the urine sample for some like lysogenic protein intolerance cases, like we need sometimes the CSF to rule out some glycine encephalopathy. So this is like all what we have. But before interpreting any amino acids, just be aware that most of the newborns, you will get the samples in non-fasting state. Okay, this is expected. So there will be some mild elevation of these amino acids. You will see it in the chromatograph. And you will see all these amino acids are in the elevated state. but this is not significant, and this is due to not fasting. Sometimes because they cannot send, they cannot. When you ask for a fasting, they will say, we cannot do that. Delay of separation that will lead for hemolysis, and that will affect some of our results. Okay, the plasma samples can be degraded also with time, so we need to process it as soon as possible. Urine amino acids are impacted, with diet, diurnal variation, urinary tract disease, and CSF should be without the blood. You know, sometimes the pediatrician, after collection the CSF, he will say, this is what I have. But you need to explain for him that it's not up to me. This is that will affect the result. That will make my interpretation sometimes is different. That's why they need to know that this is our requirements. Okay? This is how the amino acids, this is in our lab. I'm showing all the results from our lab. So mainly we have this our internal standard, the leucine, and these all amino acids. You know, when I'm looking for my amino acids for this one, you know how I'm looking at? I'm not seeing a chromatoid. Simply I'm seeing an oasis. I have a small oasis and I have two deserts. Okay, and all of them. Okay, so we can see there's a lot of amino acids and everything. All of them, they are important, but for us, I want just to consider in this oasis. Many of the metabolic disorders of the inborn errors of metabolism, you can find it in this way. Of course, all of them they will have, but this is a particular one. And these deserts, which we don't see anything, we need also to concentrate on. Okay, because anything can come in that area. Maybe it will matter. It will make some differences. Okay, so we need to pay attention for that. Okay, there is some diet that will give and some elevation of amino acids, but it's not inborn errors of metabolism. Liver dysfunction can also glutamine, methionine, phenylalanine, and tyrosine. Okay, organic acids. For organic acids, this is the GCMS, which is the main one. I'm not going to go also in details about the technique, but I will simply tell you, after all this derivatization, acidification, methylization, everything, and the preparation of the sample, after it goes to the machine, simply you can know one very, very important thing, that this sample, it will go to the chromatograph, it will be eluted with time, then after finished the elution, this organic acid will be broken down, okay? So for very small, mass to charge ratios. These very small, it's like a fingerprint, where it will help me in the identification of any of these organic aciduries. Okay? This is how it looks. Like when you see with time, this is the chromatograph, all these peaks comes like that, and at the same time you have this spectrum where it will go over there. This is our fingerprint. So sometimes because the peaks, that there is some factors which will affect the elution. Okay? He will recognize by time. He knows that this Dr. Ayman, he will come in that time. So maybe somebody else will come. So he will discover it by time. He will tell you that this is the peak. The machines are great. The technologies are perfect. But my advice, believe your eyes. Believe your instinct. Okay? Sometimes there is something which can affect. There's some analytical issues, pre-analytical issues. So always you need to doubt any of these results. Okay? This is how the chromatograph, this is the organic acid. We have also two internal standard. This is tropic acid and the margaric. And the organic acid, they will be coming fluctuating according to the condition, about this is is normal, abnormal, or about feeding. Okay, and this is how the mass spec. This is here in time. This is the retention time. But here we can see the mass spec, mass to charge ratio. For each of this acid, you will see all these peaks, so you can identify easily that this is really that acid or not. Aside, before interpreting any organic acids, I want you to know this is not only for organic, also for anybody else. You know, when you get the sample, it's like a snapshot of time, so it's reflecting the condition when the sample was collected. That's why in the period of decompensation or the presentation of the symptoms, that is the best time to collect the sample. Because if the baby on remission is good, maybe you will not find all these elevations. They will not be very significantly elevated. That's why even if there is, in this clinical data, they are mentioning about some conditions, you need to check. How is the baby now? You can call the doctor. You only collected the sample. He was critical? There is some symptoms? No, he's fine. He's totally fine. So when he's totally fine, you will see maybe sometimes some analytes will be less. It will not be the same, reflecting the same condition. Okay, and acylcarnitines, the tandem mass, this is the great machine, which is also very specific, very accurate, and like it's giving very sensitive. He can within less time, he can run a lot of samples. So like any technique, there is some advantages and disadvantages. But this is like one of the greatest machines in our field. We can say that with the help of these acylcarnitines and amino acids, we can rule out some fatty acid oxidation defects, some organic acidemias, amino acids, and it will give you the result very fast. Okay? But for detection of most fatty acid oxidation defects, the sample should be collected also in the presentation of symptoms. So we need to keep it like this all in mind. Before interpreting any acylcarnitines, you need to understand also very important things, that some antibiotics and some food additives will lead to elevation of some of these acylcarnitines. Some dietary intake of fatty acids, like ketogenic diets and medium chain disorders, can also make it artificial increase of some of these acylcarnitines. This is like one of these acylcarnitines, and what is like sometimes they are affecting. So when we have any elevation of any of these acylcarnitines, we need sometimes to check whether there was some administration of any of these medications or of any of these conditions. This is how it looks, the tandem spectrum. This is like all the mass to charge ratio with their standards. Every, like the acylcarnitines, these are the amino acids, and with their help we can detect any abnormality and we go for it. Okay, so I think enough from these technologies. I will go now, we will start our part. I will show some scenarios, okay? And I need your help to tell me what next and what is the abnormalities, fine? So, first case, if we have a baby, it's like some few days, baby boy, full term. This is the clinical data form, by the way. We're requesting the pediatricians to provide us. Why? Because it's giving me some of the information about the condition of that baby. Some doctors, by the way, they are feeling that this is like a supplement. So even it will empty, he will give you the clinical data form. It's a loose. Okay, so in that condition for this baby, okay, we found that there is a family history of hyperammonemia. Fine? Okay, let's go further for some detections. We can see there is hyperammonemia, lactate is normal, there is no acidosis, there is normal anion. But all of us, we know the importance of ammonia, okay? So in that condition, I need to call the pediatrician, call him. I need to get some more information. So he told you that this baby lethargic, vomiting, hypothermia, encephalopathic, there is some breathing difficulties, there is some episodes of seizures, and hyperammonemia. Again, he is mentioning about this hyperammonemia, okay? But we know how it's important and how it's critical to leave this ammonia, how it's affecting the brain and how it's going to lead for death also. So we need to pay attention. Anybody can tell me now, when we have such a case, what we think about? Urea cycle disorders. Why? Because we know from the urea cycle disorders, the ammonia will get out of our bodies. So when we have this hyperammonemia, okay, the urea cycle. So first machine, which is the fastest, I'm going to get some elementary information. I got suddenly the result from tandem. The tandem must give me that there is citrulline is showing 1.9, arginine 4.9 with a cut of this 12 and this 10. So I have low citrulline and arginine with hyperammonemia. So I'm suspecting inborn errors of metabolism. Fine? Fine. Next, I want to go further. I want to see this citrulline and arginine, from where they came and how the metabolism. So I will go immediately for I think maybe it's urea cycle, correct? Urea cycle. This is one more of the most common inborn errors. By the way, here in Kuwait, we have a lot of urea cycle disorders. And arginine-succinic, it's not one of the rares, really. And they can present in different ages, and we need to check. So let's go for the metabolic pathway. When you are going to interpret any results, keep the metabolic pathway. Look for it. Keep it in mind. For ammonia to go out from the body, it goes for urea and get out. So I have here a lot of stations. Okay, I have multiple stations where this urea ammonia will go, and finally it will get out. So when I have a urea cycle disorder with hyperammonemia, I need to suspect one of them. Is it enough to tell the doctor that I have a urea cycle? He needs to be more specific. He will tell you which condition I have. Okay? So in such this urea cycle disorders, there must be a key asset, my primary marker, where I will look first, then I will go further. Which one?
Arginine?
No.
Hmm?
Citrulline. Why citrulline? It's in the middle. And now you will see with the chromatographs why especially citrulline. Because you need, when we see these acids, the life before citrulline is different from the life after citrulline. And we'll see how they will be elevated and how it will be changed. So first, let's agree. First thing, when I see a I'm suspecting urea cycle disorder, and I'm thinking about with this hyperammonemia, I know to diagnose, I will check citrulline. So this is the algorithm. This is my algorithm. So any hyperammonemia with no acidosis, no ketosis, normal anion gap, okay? I need to think about urea cycle. Go first for citrulline. According to the citrulline result, if it's low, then maybe like OTC, CPS. If it's normal, we'll check for arginine. If the arginine is high, maybe argininemia. If it's low, it's lysinoic protein, maybe. If the citrulline is high, I'm thinking about arginine-succinic aciduria, or I'm thinking about citrullinemia also. It's good in both conditions. So in this, following this algorithm, we can finally come to the final diagnosis, which is we need. So let's get back for our patient. We got this amino acid. This is our normal, this is our real conditions. What do you see?
Citrulline peak is not there.
Okay, glutamine is high. Okay, okay, glutamine is high. And as we said, the oasis, as Dr. Abdullah said, citrulline, it's almost not there. There is no peak. Next, else. Huh? No, we can see here, okay, this is the citrulline very low, and I also a very low arginine. And also some amino acids are low. So here, what's for a urea cycle? Okay, now you will see why. The urea cycle, I need to check. So in this condition, I found that citrulline is almost 0.8, arginine 3. Okay, so let's get back for our algorithm. Okay, so we thought citrulline is low. So where do you think the damage is? After or before citrulline? Before, because if it's after that, we need for accumulation of citrulline, logically. Okay, so that means that these are out of the race, or these three. I have these two becoming hot. So now we need to decide in which of them. So here I need a secondary marker of beyond of this that citrulline. So which will be? Okay, the uric acid, but this is how it's coming. We need to know that this is because of the carbamoyl phosphate. This is my target. The carbamoyl phosphate I'm not going to detect, but I know that this ammonia with CP acid will give me the carbamoyl. Then with ornithine transcarbamylase, it will give me the citrulline. So if any of these accumulation, it can go with alternate pathway of the cytosol, go for uric and uracil. If it's the deficient, it's above before, so I will not have this carbamoyl phosphate, correct? Okay, fine. So I need to check this uric acid and uracil. Where can I find them?
Organic acid.
In urine organic acid. And then she said, so I will go for urine organic acid. Okay, we get the result. What we can see?
Peaks.
Wait.
In the middle, uric.
Uric normally cannot be seen. It will be totally metabolized. So when you see any uric acid, you need to make it sure. Great. I'm happy. You are happy, Dr. Abdullah. You got uric. Are you sure? Are you sure it's uric?
Yes,
No doubts?
لا ممكن it's call you to do something.
The thing is what we are going to talk now. Always doubt. Always when you see these ones. I'm not saying that there is deficiencies of the instrumentations. I'm saying some analytical or pre-analytical effect. What I mean here, when we see the urine organic acid, always I'm going for the spectrum. Because maybe here, this uric may be something else. It comes in air retention time. It comes earlier on time, right? So it can, the machine, it will identify in the beginning it will start with time. So he knows that in that particular time, uric acid will come. But still we need to confirm, please confirm it all the time. Confirm it with the mass to charge ratio. So when you see this 254 and 357, which they are specific for uric acid, that means I have uric. In that condition, you can say that I have ornithine transcarbamylase deficiency. Okay? This is which will, the block it will be over here. That's why I have the accumulation of orotic acid. Correct? Then I will give them my final diagnosis. The result is showing significantly low citrulline and arginine with the presence of orotic acid in urine organic acid, which may suggest urea cycle disorder, between two brackets I can put it very hardly, ornithine transcarbamylase deficiency. Okay? Fine? Next. Let's assume that patient with that is the clinical, but we got this result. Huh?
High ammonia also.
High ammonia.
High citrulline.
We said with hyperammonemia, I'm saying the same condition, the same clinical picture that previous. So hyperammonemia, we need to think as first citrulline, our target. What is citrulline? I have a very significantly high citrulline. It's showing 3022. Look how many times above the cutoff. Okay? So I have a significant, and with low arginine. Let's go back for metabolic pathway. I have significant elevation of citrulline, correct? So the damage is before or after? After. It means these two conditions are out of the race. So I still have only these three. But I still need to confirm one of them. Okay? So in that condition, if I have this ASS, which is arginine-succinic synthase, will give for arginine-succinic, and arginine-succinic lyase, which will metabolize it for arginine, then for arginase to give arginine. So I can know immediately here if the problem in arginase, so what will happen with arginine?
We know.
It will be?
No.
No, if the block here, it will be accumulated. So arginine will be significant. I have low, so this is out. Then arginine-succinic or the lyase or synthase. Because of this significant elevation, you know, like keep it in mind sometimes in many of these results. When the block is here, when there is a Q is coming, and you have a block somewhere, in the beginning, right just behind that analyte, it will be very high. If the block is earlier, so these analytes which are here, they will be metabolized. Then they will come to the block. So you will, from the results, sometimes the values, you can suspect that maybe this condition or not. Here I have this significant elevation of that citrulline with no arginine-succinic. I don't see the arginine-succinic. That means I can say that this out of the race, I have the arginine-succinic acid synthase deficiency, which is, we call the citrullinemia. I will report it as I will say that there is significant elevation of citrulline with low arginine, which may suggest urea cycle disorder, between brackets, citrullinemia. Okay? This is citrullinemia. Next, I got this picture. Same condition, same hyperammonemia. First, where we need to go? Citrulline. How about citrulline?
No.
Elevated, elevated, little bit elevated. So, arginine, it's okay, normal. There is something, no? Careful. So here I have citrulline 300, not like that one, 3000. It's elevated. I have elevation of this citrulline, but 300. But what? Yeah, my oasis. My oasis. I told you about my deserts. If something jumping in my deserts, I need to check. Okay? So here, I can say that we have these for arginine-succinic. Mr. Arie was describing, but here, when I'm having any of these arginine-succinic aciduria, I'm expecting to see in the amino acid analysis 3 metabolites. These are 3 clear peaks. Okay? And we will see, not to confuse them with anything else. We will have in this area where, in the standard comes like for homocysteine, but it's not homocysteine. We have 2 peaks, and where you see the ratio, one small, one big. The third one, the third metabolite, it will come between here, between leucine and isoleucine. Sometimes it's called lutein. Sometimes it's like in the neurophase, so they will go together. So usually when I have such a condition, I see this arginine-succinic. So if I go for metabolic pathway, the citrulline is high. That means these 2 conditions out. I have significant elevation of this one, and I have the arginine-succinic. That means, sure, the block is not above. And there is no arginine. This one is out, and the arginase is out. So I have this condition, which we call it arginine-succinic aciduria. I will report it. I will say there is significant elevation of citrulline with normal arginine, and which, with the presence of arginine-succinic acid peaks, we need to tell them in the report that there is peaks we noticed, or we found a peaks for arginine-succinic acids, which may suggest arginine-succinic aciduria for further investigations. Okay? So here again, I'm telling you to see all of them. Sometimes these, they will come very close. Again, you will go for the clinical picture, you ask for another sample, and maybe we can help of some technical help. Okay? This arginine. Next, same condition. Citrulline. It's normal being. This is what normally we see. If you see in your picture. Yeah, glutamine high. I don't have any elevation of citrulline, no arginine, and I have significant elevation of that arginine. It's showing 760 micromole per liter. I have a significant with hyperammonemia, no acidosis, no ketosis. I'm suspecting urea cycle with this significant arginine. So for the metabolic pathway, you expect, okay? So no these, because not elevated citrulline, and without this elevation, so I have this arginine, which we call it the condition argininemia. Okay? So I will report it as significant elevation of arginine, which may suggest urea cycle disorders. Between brackets, I will put arginine. Enough for hyperammonemia? Enough. Okay? I just want to describe how the metabolic pathway, how it's very beautiful and how it will help. Okay? The softwares and the machine, they will give us some indication. But all the time, check with your eyes all these steps and all these conditions. Okay? Another baby. Failure to thrive, feeding difficulties, development delay, vomiting, lethargy, some episodes of seizures, hepatomegaly. Nothing very specific. Okay? Still, we don't know what we have. Then when they got to the admitted, they came and they found severe metabolic acidosis, some ketosis, lactic acidemia, hyperammonemia. Again, hyperammonemia. Shall we remove the urea cycle? No. Even though. No, you are right. You're totally right. But in that condition, practically, still keep it the urea cycle suspicious in your mind. Okay, because we don't know all these, as she said, Dr. Fatma, but this still maybe some analytical problem. Something gave you the ketosis. But to keep that maybe could be that condition of the urea cycle. So when we got all these conditions, I need to suspect something. So let's go for newborn screening. We got the report from newborn screening. They gave us this result. Short change. We have here normal amino acids, nothing abnormality, but we have C3 is high in the acyl-carnitine profile. The C3, anybody knows what's the name? What's carnitine? It's propionine. Propionine carnitine. This propionine carnitine is elevated. Okay, so still I don't know too much about this case. So usually what we will do in a practical life, when I see such a condition from newborn screening, I will ask for another sample. Confirmatory. Okay, I need another filter card with another conditions, so I will go for the another sample. I get this result. The C3 was 10. After I rechecked and I got in the by tandem mass in my lab, we got this 48 C3 significantly elevated. Okay, so now I need just to decide where I need to go. I have this C3 high, significantly high. Anybody have any suspicious condition? Propionic or methylmalonic. Great. So these where I'm going to see urine organic acid. So logically I will ask for a urine sample for doing. So, but before doing that, let's go for the algorithm. This is the propionine carnitine. Propionine carnitine is, if it's accumulated, that means there is a block somewhere here. It's from isoleucine valine. It will come for propionine CoA with the carboxylase, propionine CoA carboxylase. It will go for methylmalonine, mutase. It will go for succinyl CoA, then for the Krebs cycle. So if I have any problem over here, it will lead for accumulation of propionine carnitine, correct? But if to make it very clear for us, I need to suspect that I will see some findings, extra findings. From here, I decided that to go for urine organic acid. I need to see methyl citrate, 3-hydroxypropionate, propionide glycine, and maybe methylmalonic acid. Okay? So I got the urine, we prepare it, we run it, and we got this result.
Methyl citric acid.
Methyl citrate. Adipic, and these ones, maybe this is because of ketosis. Okay. Still, this is not classical, but I can see, you can see here, 3-hydroxypropionic and I can check also with the spectrum 177, 219. Then I'm going with peaks, correct? I can see the methyl citrate. Okay, great. What about this peak? It's not labeled. The machine didn't identify. It came a little bit maybe like out of sight. Shall I check or no need? Let's check. It's very big peak. Let me check. So when I check, I got 218247, which is a specific mass to charge ratio for methyl malonic acid. That means this big peak is methyl malonic acid. But maybe because of little shift, so it didn't came in time, that make a difference. So I have methyl malonic, I have the methyl citrate, I have 3-hydroxypropionate, I have all these conditions. So if I repeat it, presentation. Okay. So here what we have, this methyl malonic, and this is after repeat I get it very clear. It's the machine identified. He knows that this is methyl malonic. So here what is the condition? You know, like when we have this C3, okay, with all these findings. When you have this one, so that means the block, it should be below. So I have methyl malonic acid with these accumulations. I cannot say that could be propionic. Why? Because I have the methyl malonic. That means I have methyl malonic aciduria deficiency. Fine? So, in that condition where we see that methyl malonic, what about? Okay, leave it. Here in this picture, in this slide, I wanted to show that only there is methyl malonic acid, okay, and that urine organic acid. But there is no any evidence of 3-hydroxypropionic, there is no any evidence of propionide, there is no any methyl citrate. Only methyl malonic. So what could be the condition? The residents who passed, huh? Excellent. So here, because I know that B12, it's helping that methyl malonine mutates to degrade. That means maybe since I don't have that full picture, that means maybe the cobalamin. I have a cobalamin, it will help the methyl malonyl CoA to go for succinyl CoA. That's good. So I have this, maybe this is due to deficiency. So when I'm going to report, I would say there is significant elevation of methyl malonic acid without methyl citrate. We need to tell them, because this is the pathognomonic one. Without methyl citrate, then we will just ask, please repeat after a course of vitamin B12, and all this methyl malonic acid can disappear. It can go after a while. What about this? Homocysteine methionine. This is cobalamin. It's not only methyl malonyl, it's also homocysteine methionine, amino acids. So what about them? This cobalamin, it will affect only one side or both? Both. It means, interesting here, what can I see in addition of that one? Here we put this one. So let's go for the pathway. This is the homocysteine and methionine. We know that methionine will go for homocysteine, with cystathionine synthase it will go for cystathionine and go home. Then with the B12, okay, it will go homocysteine to methionine. So if I have a deficiency of this B12, homocysteine could accumulate. What about methionine? It will be deficient. In that condition, so if I have a problem with this cobalamin, what can I see? If we put this aside, here the chromatograph. In the desert, where we can see, this is homocysteine peak, okay? And what about the methionine? It's like small, there is a small methionine. That means that really what we call it, the block. It's not in this enzyme, it will go all, but the B12 is the problem here. So in that condition where we saw the methyl malonic acid elevation due to B12, also in amino acid analysis, I can expect to see this picture. I will see some homocystinuria. This is what they call it homocystinuria type 2. Okay, this is due to the B12. So when we mention here, sometimes they call it methionine synthase deficiency. So when we mention homocystinuria, Okay, not classical. This is type 2. Then somebody will ask, what about type 1? What about type 1? Where it could be the type 1. Then it's at the same time we are now discussing. Let's see, what about type 1? Then the type 1, we know that there is a deficiency of the enzyme, of the cystathionine synthase. So the block is over here. That will make elevation of homocysteine. And what about methionine? Will be increased. So when I see a chromatograph, you expect to see such a chromatograph. Again, but for my desserts, you can see there is a small peak of homocysteine and look for methionine. Methionine 929 and homocysteine 22. That means this is what we call it classical homocystinuria. Even in the clinically, they will give you some problems, lens dislocations. You will have some of these problems you can identify. What about? Okay, so here we just knew that from metabolic pathway, the problem is here. That's why I have the accumulation of methionine and this homocysteine. Okay, this classical homocystinuria. Yeah.
But since we started 15 minutes late, we have the workshop till 11:30. But if everyone is interested, we can continue.
Continue? By the way, Dr. Ahmed told me I have 1 hour. Not 45 minutes. So if you are still feeling interesting, I can continue. There is a couple of cases. Okay, so I will go faster. What about this one? This is homocystinuria?
No.
Dr. Sneha, she called me before a couple of days asking for this. This is like you see, it's on the time. This is on the standards for homocysteine. It's showing this peak. But this is like, when we see such one, this broad one, you need to think that this is baby off. In the newborns, sometimes you expect to see this broad. It will be broad peak, not very sharp one. So homocysteine, it will be sharp. Arginine-succinic, it will be very sharp. And this one, it will be like as a newborns, accumulation of some substances. With time, it will go. Okay? I will go very fast. This, you remember this first one, C3? Okay? And we went for methylmalonic. What about if we went for urine organic acid and we got this picture? We got 3-hydroxypropionate, propionate glycine, methyl citrate, but there's no methylmalonic acid. So that, after getting all these spectrums, we will go for the pathway. So here what we have, we don't have methylmalonic acid. Okay? So it is what we call it propionic acidemia. Okay? Sometimes if you are going to interpret and you will see such a condition and without methylmalonic and C3 because suspected, by the way, all these methyl citrate, they are specific for propionic?
No.
They are specific for propionic? No. It's also for methyl citrate. For methylmalonate. Okay? So what's happening if you are going to interpret? You will tell there is elevation of methyl citrate, 3-hydroxypropionic, and this one, which may be propionic acidemia or methylmalonic. Then the metabolic specialist will laugh on us. Because he knows if you don't have any methylmalonic, don't tell me could be methylmalonic or propionic. Hardly. You need to say that this is propionic acidemia. Why I'm showing this? Because of this clinical picture of that propionic acidemia. There is severe hyperammonemia, metabolic acidosis, elevated anion gap, lactic acidemia, hyperglycemia in a propionic acidemia. So why we have this glycine due to the cleavage system of the glycine. How it looks? We will see this picture. You will get this result. You will find, okay, everything is fine and fine. I have this only significant elevation of a glycine, 1,680. The cutoff is much, much less. So I have a significant elevation of this glycine. All others are completely normal. So what you are going to report? What I'm going to report? When you see this picture, we don't know any information else. You will say that the results showing significant elevation of a glycine. Fine? To repeat, to check, be careful with this paper. You know why? Because if you are going to give this interpretation or this suspicious, that significant elevation, you will describe the findings, correct? You are not doing something wrong. You describe what the finding. But immediately, if the paper comes in the hands of pediatricians, normal pediatricians, he will go to the books or to Google, he will see significantly high glycine. First thing which will come to his mind, non-ketotic hyperglycemia, glycine encephalopathy. So what will be his next step? He will go for puncture for CSF and for that baby. And you know how it's difficult. Maybe it's just caused a small cold to that pediatrician. He will tell you that it's a known case. Simply, he will tell you that this is a known case of propionic acidemia. So no need to bother yourself about that. This is maybe non-ketotic, and we have ketosis. So that means this is what sometimes they describe before as ketotic hyperglycemia. Next scenario, next case. Okay?
So in this case, so we don't need to comment or
You will comment, but you can simply say that this is known case. Yani, like sometimes there is some doctors who say, when you look for a chromatograph, there is sick, but after a treatment, it comes all normal. So shall I write normal? Now after I checked after treatment, it comes normal. So shall I write no significant abnormality?
No.
Why?
Because it's already known.
But the thing is that nobody knows maybe that he's on treatment. That maybe nobody what about that condition. And if it falls in the hand of the parents, sometimes they will go for some lawyers which they don't understand our language. He will tell you, no significant abnormality. That means that your previous diagnosis about there is abnormality was wrong. Then try to prove it. So I prefer in the bottom to write just known case. I'm not saying there is abnormality or there is no abnormality in that time being, but I'm saying it's a known case of propionic acidemia. It's a known case of methylmalonate. Okay? So this is another baby, boy, few days, irritable, poor feeding, hypertonia, hypotonia, alternating, neurological deteriorations, some episodes of seizures, urine malodor, vomiting, then sometimes hypoglycemia and with acidosis. Anything? Because of this. Let's assume they didn't give us the maple odor. There is no. So we will go for tandem. Tandem, this is the fastest, okay, because it comes very aerial. Not the best, Mr. Arikan, but it's the fastest, will come like once. Yeah? So we got this one, you got leucine, isoleucine, significantly high value. Now he will be happy because this machine is not going to give me, I cannot isolate leucine from isoleucine in tandem. They will give you an all together because they are very close isotopes. So in that condition, when I have this picture, so I will go next for asking the help of Mr. Arikan. I will go for the amino acid chromatograph. I will have this picture. You can see it, the abnormalities. I'm looking for this branch chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. So when we see these elevations, and we have significant elevation of leucine. Look for the values. This is when newly diagnosed, you will see this one. It will not be isoleucine, the biggest, or valine. It will be leucine, the highest. When you see such a picture, you need to suspect this condition. And of course, as Dr. Rashi said, we have here, this is small peak. It comes between methionine and isoleucine, which we call it allo-isoleucine. This is the pathognomonic for this condition for MSUD. Okay, so when you see it, you see this allo-isoleucine, you need immediately to think about it. So this is the branch chain, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. We know that the problem is the branch chain keto acid dehydrogenase. But what about this? Keto-isovalerate, to keto-methylvalerate, to keto-isocaproate. This is organic acid, so we need to see them in urine. So here we know that these are elevated. I need to go for this. Once you see such organic acid, okay? If you get it, put it on the wall, outside. From seeing from here, I can tell you, maybe it's MSUD. The only condition where these people, they like to be in one wagon, in one metro. They don't want to go anywhere else. You will find that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of them in one place, and the others are completely normal. The MSUD, which will show this picture. Okay, so I can see here all these metabolites. I know that this is MSUD, but we need to know that plasma allo-isoleucine can be falsely elevated due to interferences sometimes with some anti-epileptics. It will show little bit elevation of these allo-isoleucine. And the branch chain amino acids can non-specifically elevated during starvation or episodes of vomiting. And these keto acids, which are urine organic acid due to extreme ketosis or lactic acidosis, also can be a little bit elevated. But of course, it will not show like in our picture where the significance. Okay? What about this? I have here leucine, I have isoleucine, valine. Is it MSUD? No allo-isoleucine. That means this is maybe due to elevation due to diet, maybe due to starvations, as we mentioned before. So don't be in a hurry. When you see these elevations, okay, don't be in a hurry. Maybe it's normal. So what about this? We can say here, by quantitation, it's normal branching, normal leucine, isoleucine, and valine. It's very, very slightly elevated. But what about There is a small peak of allo-isoleucine. This simply, it's a MSUD treatment because they will start giving the isoleucine and the valine, so they will suppress the quantitation. You can find and you can see. So you need to expect this picture. You will see normal branching amino acid, but you found this allo-isoleucine because maybe in the request form nothing was mentioned. No, you don't know anything in the request form. So when you see such a picture, you need to suspect that maybe this is a known case. Last case. Okay, I know maybe you got bored. So this boy, baby boy, few days irritable, poor feeding, failure to thrive, vomiting, liver failure, renal tubulopathy, Fanconi syndrome. And when they go to the lab, they found hypophosphatemia, hypoglycemia, high liver transaminases. When you see in metabolic, suspected metabolic disorder, you found any problems of liver? Tyrosine. Don't forget, they like each other. You know, why they like each other? Because sometimes if you have tyrosinemia, that will damage the liver. So you'll have liver problem. But at the same time, if you have a liver problem due to some other causes, that will affect the enzyme which is going to be produced from the liver. So that will affect the degradation and metabolism of tyrosine. You will have this high tyrosine. So they will be playing with each other. So when you have this like with liver failure and this one condition, suspect, let's go for tyrosine. So we got the results of the amino acid chromatography. So what we got here, let's go for our oasis. This phenylalanine is normal. We have, look for the big tyrosine. Okay? And else, there is something here else. I can see here, there is a big peak of methionine. Usually the methionine will be at this level. I have a big one. Methionine, by the way, it's not very specific for tyrosinemia, but it's very helpful. And then in some conditions, there will be methionine and tyrosine will be elevated. So in this condition, I have methionine 141 and tyrosine 276. The cutoff for tyrosine, it's about 100. So it's like just 2 times elevated. So I need to suspect, I need to go for, to rule out any of these conditions. So I go for the metabolic pathway. You know, there is like a urea cycle. We have different conditions. This from tyrosine, phenylalanine comes from tyrosine, and there will be some metabolites, then we'll go to the end. And I have different conditions, okay? So here, like in that urea cycle, when we mentioned about citrulline, what will be here my key? Succinylacetone. Why? Because this succinylacetone, it will give me a hint about one of the serious conditions. It's very critical. I don't want to miss tyrosinemia type 1. So in any case, all of them, they will have high tyrosine. But I need to check this succinylacetone. It will give me or to go to the left or to go to the right. Okay? So in that condition, I need succinylacetone. Where can I find it? In urine. We can see it, but sometimes not. There is another method, which is the tandem. In our filter paper, now recently we started with a new method where we can find the succinylacetone. So if we go for tandem, we see also elevated of tyrosine. It comes very high tyrosine. Then I will tell our medical technologists, because it needs special preparation. So normally they will not detect, but when I see that there is tyrosine, I will please reanalyze it with a sample preparation and for succinylacetone. We got this for succinylacetone. It's elevated, it's 11, the cutoff is up to 2. I have very significant elevation of this succinylacetone. So in that condition, shall I go for urine? Go for urine. Ask for the confirmation for this succinylacetone. So if I go for urine, you know, when I see such a picture of urine organic acids, there is a lot of peaks, okay? So I need here to know where is succinylacetone. We know by our practice that the succinylacetone can be detected between the time 20 and this 25. It will be in that area. So when you have suspicious of tyrosinemia type 1, you know, nobody wants to miss succinylacetone or miss this tyrosinemia type 1. It's very critical. Within few days, it will will deteriorate and it will die. So we need to carefully, in that condition, when I see such a picture and I'm suspecting succinylacetone, you know, I'm going to check every single peak, even small, big, whatever it can, I need to check. So finally, I got this spectrum, the 212 and 227, which I know they are very specific for succinylacetone. That means I have this big peak, this is succinylacetone. And I have significant elevation of these para-hydroxyphenyl acids, which they are the metabolites of tyrosine. When they accumulate, I have these acids will be accumulating. I will see very big peaks of these acids. In that condition, I can see that this is, so because there is, I have succinyl acetone, that means the block couldn't be up. This is out. So I have only this succinyl acetone. We know the toxicity of this mallyl acetoacetate, fumaryl acetoacetate. Just one point I want to raise. When they're going to start the treatment for tyrosine type 1, the best treatment, anybody have any idea? By mistake. Because this is like a clinical, they will start with NTBC, okay, nitisinone, for the treatment of tyrosine type 1. Why? Because this NTBC is going to affect the para-hydroxyphenyl pyruvic acid deoxygenase to reduce the formation of this succinyl acetone. Logic? Clear? No doubts. Okay? So, what you expect here, if you are like checking your amino acid chromatography, when you are getting succinyl acetone, this is in the filter card, on that one it will be less. But what about in your amino acid analysis? If the block, if this one I'm affecting here, I'm stopping this one. What about the tyrosine in that condition? It will increase. Don't be afraid. They start treatment. Maybe sometimes, some pediatrics say, they started the treatment, but tyrosine is going up. That means this is wrong treatment. صح? But this is not correct. But by the way, they will immediately, when they will see our results, that tyrosine shooting up, he will immediately start protein restriction or giving special formula, which is free of phenylalanine and tyrosine. Then he will have the balance. Okay? This is like one of the conditions. What about if I got this tyrosine? 1169. So first I need to go by protocol. Where I will go? Succinyl acetone. We went for the tandem mass and we found it is normal. Then urine. We go for urine, normal succinyl acetone. But we found the metabolites. Para-hydroxyphenyl acetic acids, phenylactic, phenylpyroic, they are significantly elevated. Could be, then you can call the pediatrician or get from a clinical data. What you will find, he will tell you that there is some corneal lesions, there is some hyperkeratosis. Then, when you find this is what they call it. Type 1, they call it hepatorenal tyrosinemia, liver and kidneys. The second type, which is this one, they call it oculocutaneous. So we have this condition. That means I don't have succinyl acetone, I don't have this homogenesic, so maybe this is simply tyrosinemia type 2 and type 3 or type 3, where the block it will be above, and that will lead to accumulation of the para-hydroxyphenyl acetic acids, okay, in urine. So this is like type 1 and type 2. Here I just want you to know that the transient neonatal hypertyrosinemia can sometimes confound the initial diagnosis of any tyrosinemia. Type 1, for sure, with succinyl acetone. Type 2 and type 3, you can be distinguished by clinical picture or molecular, and they need to be repeatedly checking tyrosine and continuously checking. Last check. What about this? Okay, tyrosine is showing 700. We will go for succinyl acetone. In tandem mass, it's normal. We went for urine. We got this normal. There is no any succinyl acetone. Even the para-hydroxyphenols, you see like how they are very small. Para-hydroxyphenyl acid. So, what can I do with my tyrosine? Huh? Here I will tell you something. Don't be in a hurry. Just continue checking your organic acids. Because when you are going to check all these peaks, when you're seeing that, homogenesic acid is hiding somewhere there. So when you are going to check each single one, and you are going to go for the spectrum, because when I see a known peak, maybe homogenesic, the word there, we can see it, maybe you can miss it, can be overlooked, even if maybe it's not missed. So when you are going to check these acids and you see this 341, 484, you need to suspect homogenesic acid. Don't think that I'm knowing all these spectrums by heart. Okay, it's written and they will be behind us all the time behind the GCMS. But here I'm thinking about alkaptonuria. When you have this alkaptonuria, what you will do? First thing, what you can say, turn your chair. Tell them your medical technology. Give me the urine. I want to see the urine. So what are you expecting to see the urine? Black. Dark. If it's normal urine. Huh? Samara, what will you do? Huh? No, when you have it, the urine, and what we can add to it. Sodium hydroxide. You get little of sodium hydroxide. If you see that urine and you are suspecting in this normal urine looks like there is some homogentic acid, add little bits, few drops of sodium hydroxide. Immediately it will become very dark. This magnetic color. That an extra addition. So when we have this, it means in the metabolic pathway we don't have these tyrosinemias. There is no succinyl acetone. So I have this type of alkaptonuria. This is homogeneity. Here I want just to show you that in one pathway, how many different conditions can have, and how we need to go metabolic pathway. Keep looking for your metabolic pathways. That will help you to what to find and what not to find. Okay? With time, you will know it all. So at the end, as a conclusion, I say that, however, given the rarity of individual disorders and the complexity of pre-analytical and analytical factors that impact testing, interpretation of results still often challenging. Careful recognition of the clinical features and integration of the multiple biochemical profiles with the laboratory testing is essential for the investigation and diagnosis. Therefore, providing an accompanying interpretation, good interpretation, that incorporate both the clinical and biochemical findings to the clinical team is very necessary due to the complexity of patterns that are observed routinely. Last take-home message, I will tell you. Look, in the beginning, for pediatricians, you can tell the pediatricians, okay? We completely, as a clinical biochemists, and we are working in that field, we completely understand how it's serious and the importance of time, okay? We know how it's critical. We know that we don't have enough time to give our final diagnosis or our interpretation. We completely understand all this. But also because of all these factors and all of this complexity and this integration of this analytical technique, we need little time. So we need to tell them, if they are going to keep pressuring on you, calling you in any time, tell them, I need 5 minutes, so I need the 5 minutes. Take your time. So, and for your advice, for a clinical biochemist, future clinical biochemist, use that time wisely. Okay? So when you are going to interpret any results, don't think I have long time. I have very specific, because time here is matter. Baby can die within any day. The damage have happened because of some delay, it's sometimes irreversible. That's why we need just to be careful with that. You know, like one secret, when I go to the lab every day, every single day, when I go to the lab, in the front of the door, I stop there, I pray for Allah. And I say, Allahumma shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Because we need the help of God sometimes. When you have this complexity and all these patterns and all these complex, you need the help from above. Then not to miss any of these cases. Okay? Allah yahmikum. Do your best. Thank you. I'm sorry that maybe it took a long time. I hope it was not so boring.